Good evening, everyone. We have our speaker tonight is Addison Monroe, and the topic is navigating meaning and purpose in the face of cancer. So, just to introduce Dr. Monroe, he is a psychologist by training and received his PhD from the University of Georgia in 2025. He has specialized clinical training in treating adults with life-limiting illness and disease and chronic pain. He has worked with individuals in all phases of the cancer continuum. Addison is currently a T32 Psycho-Oncology Research Fellow in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. His research interests include meaning-centered psychotherapy, adaptation, psychosocial interventions for cancer pain, and palliative care intervention development. So welcome, Dr. Addison. I will unpin myself and you can start.
Excellent. Thank you, Jen. Bear with me a minute, everyone, as I figure out how to share my screen best. All right. All right. Can you see that, Jen?
Yes.
Okay, great, great. Well, thank you so much, Jen, and for everyone for having me. It's great to be part of the Happy Feet talks. I heard about Cancer Bridges several months ago, and right away I just loved it. Everything you're doing is amazing, and it's also housed in the best. I probably shouldn't say it as being from Sloan Kettering, but it's the best city there is. So Pittsburgh is a special place in my heart. So it's great to be here today with all you. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about meaning and purpose in the face of cancer, what that looks like, and hopefully really try to provide some practical tools to take home as you navigate. I don't have any disclosures per se. I did want to mention that and give credit to some of the research I'll be talking about at the end of today's presentation is from a couple of colleagues, so that's listed here. I also wanted to say that these views that I have, I'll be talking a lot about something called meaning-centered psychotherapy. Although I try to do my best to give a great overview. The views that I share today are my own, and this is technically not going to be a therapy per se, but just using that therapy as a foundation to give you all tools today. So here's what I'll go over. I want to clarify a couple of concepts. As you all can imagine, I think meaning and purpose are terms that are used a lot, but they tend to be very abstract, hard to define, which again, it makes it a really interesting area and an area that I love. But it can be kind of hard to take these concepts and boil them down into kind of practical application. So I'll be doing my best to do that. I'm going to introduce you all to the foundations of meaning-centered psychotherapy, which is where I think a lot of the skill sets for navigating meaning and purpose in the face of cancer can be found. And then again, lastly, along the way, I hope to give you some practical tools with a special emphasis on, I think, again, because it's such a broad and important area, I almost think what I'm giving you is motivation for engaging in tools rather than the tools themselves. So giving you the why behind using these tools. And another goal I have hopefully is to touch on areas that should apply across the cancer continuum, whether you have a new diagnosis of cancer, whether you're in treatment, navigating different types of treatments and those challenges and limitations, survivorship, and metastatic cancer as well. So let's start with the big question of what do we even mean by meaning in life? I wonder if there's anyone brave out there that wants to either type in the chat or there's no wrong answers, I promise. But what do you think of when you think of a person having a strong sense of meaning in life? Purpose, Patty, very good. reasons to get up in the morning, using your gifts and talents, fulfillment and purpose, living life to the fullest, excellent, determination, a lot of purpose coming through, amazing. Those are all absolutely correct. And I really like finding the good. Another very good example. I really think purpose comes out a lot in fulfillment. Those words that you all are used. Determination is a big part of this too that I'm going to talk about today. So you all kind of did a lot. Sometimes I have to take a longer moment to kind of try to define meaning in life, but you all did such an amazing job. Um, so this is how we define meaning in life, and it's very much along the lines of what you all said. But I think it's helpful to get a consistent, full definition. So having a sense that one's life has meaning involves conviction in fulfilling a unique purpose, like many of you said. So why, having a why. And this is in the context of having a life that comes with the responsibility to live to one's potential, kind of like some of you had said, determination and motivational elements too. In doing so, being able to achieve a sense of peace and contentment. So those are the byproducts of having a strong sense of meaning in life. And connecting often with something greater than oneself, which is also what you all kind of alluded to. And meaningfulness refers to the moments that make life worth living, or our need to be alive. So things from the past that we can also look back on as well. So if I didn't bring up Viktor Frankl's work, I wouldn't be doing a very good job. I don't know if any of you have heard of Viktor Frankl and in the book Man's Search for Meaning, and feel free to mention in the chat what your thoughts are if you have. But Viktor Frankl, very briefly, was a Viennese psychiatrist that lived during the time of World War II. He was working on a theory called logotherapy, where he's developing a therapy already that tapped into meaning and purpose for people. During World War II, he was Jewish, so he was sent to a concentration camp. And he was able to survive concentration camps, including Auschwitz. And what he came out with was, again, a more fully formed theory of logotherapy, which is meaning-based therapy. And he famously wrote Man's Search for Meaning, which I highly recommend if you ever have a chance to read if you have not yet. And again, I'm not doing it justice, but very briefly, what Frankel focused on was the fact that some prisoners were a bit more resilient, a bit able to kind of make it through such a horrendous time when everything was taken from them. Their rights, their ability to do anything really was stripped from them. And he really focused on the fact that you still had the ability to choose how you respond to suffering. You cannot choose your suffering, but you have the ability to choose how you respond to it. In underlying his theory, a big part of it is these 3 points here, which is that humans are meaning-seeking creatures. We're always searching for meaning. Second is that meaning can be found in any moment, and I'm going to talk about that a lot more. And then third, rather, we can choose to find meaning in any given moment as well. So I think one thing I always want to make sure too when I mention Viktor Frankl's work is this is not the same as appreciating suffering or suggesting that it's good in any way. It is rather saying that meaning in life and suffering can occur together. Whereas some things are not available when you're suffering, such as in his example. So that brings me to meaning-centered psychotherapy, which is a form of therapy that was developed at Sloan Kettering by Dr. Breitbart and his colleagues. And essentially, they took Frankl's framework and developed it into a therapy, as we saw that in the cancer context and across the cancer continuum, people often struggled with this idea of meaning and purpose due to the suffering that comes in many forms, which I'm going to also talk about. So this is a great representation, I think, of what meaning-centered psychotherapy is all about, and also what I hope all my practical tools that I share with you all today is all about. So we have a diagnosis of cancer, and that comes along with pain and suffering in many forms. Physical suffering, right? There's treatments that cause side effects. There's the cancer itself that causes physical suffering. There's emotional suffering, the idea of existing with uncertainty about the future, the idea of existing with uncertainty about one's illness. There's relational factors as well and social factors. How do we talk about cancer with others? How do we integrate this into our identity? How do we communicate about it? And there's also spiritual factors as well, including the larger questions that we ask ourselves in these times. Again, pulling back to Frankel's work, um, as a consequence of the suffering that people face when they have cancer, it's possible that we lose a sense of meaning in life. But I also, these other two options is where I hope to emphasize. It is also possible that we sustain or even enhance meaning in the face of cancer as well. And I hope to kind of provide a good overview of how we can ensure that we do that. So ultimately, identity comes up a lot as well, which I think some of you put in the chat when we try to define meaning in life. So a big part, a big piece of this is I understanding and reflecting on who one was before cancer and then who is one now. What explains the gap between those answers? And are you satisfied with that gap? So these are good questions to consider when navigating this is how has cancer impacted the sense of who you are? Because ultimately, when we want to maintain meaning and purpose in life, we're trying to maintain a sense of who we are. So moving hopefully towards what I was getting to some more practical, how do we tap into this? These sources of meaning is how we ultimately connect or reconnect with a sense of meaning. And there's four that I hope to go through with you all, and maybe you can all make note of some of the takeaway messages for each of these sources of meaning. Um, so the first is called the historical source of meaning. This comes along with the legacy triad. So this is the idea that everyone sitting here today has been given a legacy. So we have been given life, and we don't choose the context in which we're born into. So that's a legacy that we don't really have control over, but we can control how we respond to what we've been given. So a lot of people will tell me, for example, most people can list some positive things from their past and some not so positive things from their past. In either case, that normally informs who you are currently. The legacy we are living, that refers to the present. So this can be things that are simple and mundane to much larger things. So an example I like to use is right now we are living our legacy by being here. I'm a very small, but hopefully a part of your story, and you all are a part of my story as we sit here today. So that's the legacy we are living. We are imprinting things on other people and being imprinted on by other people as well. And how we choose to do that is important. And then finally, the legacy, I think when most people hear the word legacy, they think of what we hope to give. This is the legacy we hope to give in the future. What lessons, what life lessons do we hope to pass on? What do we want people to remember us by? Those are normally answers to those questions can help us to tap in with what truly fills us with meaning and purpose. So for me, for example, I think I hope people, I hope I come off as someone who is curious and someone who cares about people in my professional life. In my personal life, it's important that I pass on humor, not taking life too seriously, right? So these are examples of things, of parts of our legacy that we hope to share and to continue to live out. So here are some ways I think to really tap into that and get to know that about yourself. So what are the most meaningful roles, activities, or accomplishments you're proud of? It doesn't necessarily have to be something, again, it's huge. It can be something smaller. It can be something that didn't come with a trophy. Oftentimes, that is the case. People will say things like having being a parent was very important for me. Experiencing, this event was very important for me. The second question I think to take home and maybe write about or ask yourself about is what legacy are you currently living? And what life lessons do you hope you'll be able to pass on? And why are these important to you? That gives you a good sense of who you are, what matters to you. And then lastly, for extra credit, I would say is would you be willing to share your legacy, your life story with a friend, family member, or loved one? I find that a lot of times in my clinical work, I've had people be very frightened of this task. But once they start doing it, it's very freeing, and you can again get a good sense of being witnessed in what you're about, what your legacy is. I'm checking the chat really quick. There we go. All right. So the first source of meaning was historical source of meaning, and the second is what we call attitudinal source of meaning. And that sounds like a weird word, but as you can imagine, it just comes with choosing one's attitude in the face of suffering. So using limitations as opportunities for growth. So Frankl referred to this often as how do we turn tragedy into triumph, right? So when you're in his example, he's getting through each day in a concentration camp. What gets him through each day? One thing he would mention was the mere fact of getting through each day was something to look on proudly, right? To get through that day was a source of meaning for him. The attitude he took towards that suffering and other prisoners as well allowed them to survive and go forward. And I think Frankl also often quoted Nietzsche, and I think this really sums up, for me personally, what meaning in life and meaning-centered psychotherapy, especially in the cancer context, is all about. So Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live for can bear with almost any how." So if you take the hows of each day, how do I get through this? How do I deal with this symptom? How do I deal with uncertainty? Those are very, very difficult questions. But how do we engage, or why we get through those and approach those questions is how we can get through each day. And that in itself, I think, really hints at the attitudinal source of meaning. So again, practical tools for you all is, are you able to still find meaning since your diagnosis? How are you able to do that? How does it look today, compared to a month ago or years ago? Oftentimes, when you ask these questions to yourself, people arrive with an attitudinal source of meaning, right? You can find out what attitude served you well in the face of everything that you've navigated. And then number two, how have you dealt with limitations or obstacles in your past? Why did it work? There's something about that probably taps into an attitude that you chose to take when you're confronted with limitations, whether they be physical, psychological, spiritual, etc. And then lastly, thinking about cancer-specific limitations. So those can be physical, again, side effects. They can be psychological, dealing with uncertainty in the unknown, and social too, and how we talk to people, how we navigate this whole thing together. The third source of meaning is called creative source of meaning. And one thing I try to make sure people know is this does not necessarily pertain just to people who are creative, or else, I would be out of luck. I have no artistic abilities at all. But luckily, what we mean by creative sources of meaning is how you outwardly express yourself in the world. So this looks like taking responsibility, engaging through life through our roles, our work, our values, or our causes that we devote ourselves to, and making commitments and taking courageous action. And I think many of you can see how this applies to the context of living with a chronic illness. is we are confronted with these additional limitations that maybe at one point in life we did not have to deal with. And then how we take that and choose to respond to that and and have responsibility in life takes courageous action. And another really point that I like to drive home is redefining to courage. Oftentimes, when we think of courage, we think of someone who has no fear or no doubt, but that is not the case at all. In fact, it's not very interesting or impressive if someone navigates a task and they had no doubt or fear. In fact, it's when there is doubt, when there is fear, that makes courage more valuable, makes it more real. You have to forgive my pixelated picture here, but this is the newest edition. Just because I watched this literally yesterday, or I saw a couple of replays of it. This is a picture of a man named Alex Honnold who climbed the tallest building in the world without ropes. And I found myself even watching this, my hands were sweating. And I realized too that this really fits well here because it's not that he did this and had no doubt or had no fear. That's why my hands were sweating, is because there was doubt, there was fear, but the ability to persist despite that and to climb, the tallest building in the world without ropes takes courage. So that's what we mean by courage. And again, I'm not advocating for to climb buildings as a way to find meaning and purpose, but I think it's a good analogy. So how do we think about the creative source of meaning in our lives practically? So creating a life again requires courage and commitment. In the face of cancer, we have further limitations requiring more courage and commitment. So looking back, I want you all to, even right now, if you want to, think of a time in which you were courageous, you took ownership, and you took responsibility and made a commitment in your life to something of value. Oftentimes, those were not easy times, but they were meaningful times. Most people would say that. So, another question that comes up is, have you expressed everything that is meaningful through your creative endeavors, through jobs, through parenting, hobbies, and causes? Are there things that you have not done? And if so, what limitations stand in the way? Um, Thinking about what are your responsibilities in life, who you're responsible for, can also be a good way to get you thinking about your creative source of meaning. And then lastly, thinking about unfinished business. Very few people, in fact, I've never seen one person reach their potential in life, right? We're always aiming to reach a potential. But the truth is, I think, and you all can comment if you agree, is if someone did everything they needed to do in life, they would be left maybe sitting in twiddling their thumbs. There wouldn't be much to do, right? So the idea is that we get to a point where we do as much as we can, but what do we do when we haven't, when we do have unfinished business that we literally can't get to? Maybe there is something that you can't get to. Then I turn to the idea of how can we forgive ourselves? How can we use self-forgiveness for the fact that all humans try our best, yet there's going to be something incomplete? And how do we rectify that? How do we accept that and move forward with that? And then lastly, I think this is one too that is almost an opposite to the last source of meaning I talked about. So the creative source of meaning is how you outwardly put yourself into the world through what you do, your actions. The experiential source of meaning is somewhat of the opposite, is how you experience meaning in life through your five senses, so inward experiences. So this is how we connect. And Frankl made a point to say that it was through love, beauty, and humor mostly. But this can be anything. I've heard people say really fascinating things when we get to the experiential source of meaning. But a good way to remember it is how we connect through life, through love, beauty, and humor. So this one is is a bit more simple. How do you connect with life most? When you all reflect, and feel free again to put it in the chat, and I'd love to read some of them. Is how have you? What have been some of the more meaningful experiences through love, through beauty, and through humor? Um, a patient once told me many times that the first time holding their child, that was an experience that made life very much intensely worth living in that moment. I like Frankel's example too. Going back to him, even in the midst of World War II and the concentration camps. There's a very profound part of his book where he talks about the prisoners looking at a sunset. And for that moment, they were able to separate themselves with what they had to bear the next day. So being able to experience that beauty is possible even in those circumstances. And then lastly, through humor. And I didn't have a great example for this one, so I just used an example from earlier today. Is my dog barking at bugs? It's little things like that. It can be little or it can be big. And again, so what do you do about this source of meaning? Um, One thing I think a lot of people is helpful for them is to reflect on, do we prioritize the experiences that have led to these connections, right? So if you enjoyed seeing a sunset, how often are you giving yourself that chance? It doesn't have to be that, but how often are you putting yourself in those situations to experience that? And taking note of what taps into your sense of having a meaning and purpose as well. So I talked a lot about, like, again, some of these oftentimes thought of as vague uh, uh, conceptualizations and whatnot. I'm going to talk a little bit about the evidence behind it here as well. So first, I just want to read through a couple of people said taking great care of loved ones. That's a great one. So caring for others. That's when you take care of others, whatever that emotion is, that experience is, that's important. That's a great answer. Another one saying taking care of my parents. A lot of taking care of people taking care of others in this group, which is good to see. Volunteering is excellent. I like volunteering too because for me that taps into the creative source of meaning, how we put ourselves out in the world, and also how you experience meaning in volunteering as well. Excellent. Thank you all for participating. So, does meaning actually matter, or is it just this vague term that this guy is talking about right now? So, it does turn out that it matters a lot, especially in chronic illness context. So, here's just one example looking at recent data. So people that experience a high level of meaning in life. This was a sample of people with highly symptomatic cancer, so people that were experiencing a lot of side effects and symptoms. People who experience a large amount of high meaning in life had lower rates of anxiety and depressive symptoms, and they also had lower rates of having distress over physical symptoms. So again, I know I'm biased. I'm a psychologist, but the physical elements, psychological elements are really embedded together with one another. And as you can see, when people don't have a sense of meaning in life, what do their symptoms and experiences look like? They have higher rates of anxiety, often higher depressive symptoms. But the really good news, and hopefully this pieces things together, is that um, meaning is movable. It's malleable. So we have evidence that we can increase it, we can connect with it, or we can reconnect with it, often through those sources of meaning that I talked about. The other fact that I like that I feel like we've clarified too when it comes to meaning is that meaning is always possible. Going back to the first image I showed you, we can experience meaning at the same time as suffering. We can't always experience meaning at this or other variables at the same time as suffering. Happiness isn't always available. What is available and what's able to be sustained when confronting different types of suffering? And then lastly, meaning is protective. So meaning protects against things, again, anxiety, worry about the future, worry about the past, quality of life, and symptom distress, just to name a few. So again, I want to give you all some examples of maybe how you might identify um, wherever you're sitting in your journey, where you can identify a few examples of how we might tap into sources of meaning and more consciously think about meaning in life in each stage. So whether it's a new diagnosis, thinking about the historical source of meaning, who have you been? And how can you preserve who you've been despite your diagnosis? Treatment, what attitude will support you in the midst of treatments? Um, as many of you know, the treatments themselves, along with the cancer, come with side effects. And in the attitude, I hear a lot of people talk about how they choose to view those treatments. And I think that's really helpful to think about. Survivorship, how can you experience life fully? Going back to that slide I showed you all too, is identity in cancer. That's a very difficult thing. So how can you experience life more fully as a survivor, given that you negotiated your identity with cancer previously? What does that look like for you? And then another kind of area that I think comes up a lot, I'm just trying to again cover the spectrum of experiences too. Can you create your life continually with courage in the presence of an uncertain future? So going back to the creative source of meaning, and the word uncertain too. That uncertainty comes up a lot in this type of work, and hopefully you all can relate to that in a way where we can start to again more consciously think about these sources of meaning as you navigate any of these areas. So that's what I have for you all. I'm definitely interested in talking more about these interesting subjects and in hearing any questions or comments you all have. But thank you so much.